Hi, it's Alaska Granny. Do you ever look in your prepper pantry and wonder, what are the 10 most important foods? What are the foods that would be most useful to me that I want to make sure that I have in my prepper pantry? Well, today I wanted to share with you the 10 foods that I decided to make sure that I always have on hand in my prepper pantry so that I can make basic meals for my family no matter the circumstances. Of course, if your power is out and you don't have an emergency way to cook, then these foods are not going to be as useful as if you had foods that are easy to just open and eat in a grid down type of an environment. But on an everyday basis where you had access to clean drinking water and you had a way to prepare and cook foods, these are the 10 items that I would most want to have on hand. The first one is all-purpose flour. Of course, it's all-purpose because you can use it for so many things, from bread to biscuits, pancakes, and just about anything that you could want to make out of flour products you could make with all-purpose flour. When you bring your flour home from the store, make sure that you put it in the freezer for a few days. Grains naturally include little weevil bugs that are already living in the grain, and so if you put them in the freezer for a few days, then it will kill those off. Some people then are concerned that the bugs could hatch later, and so they do a freeze, thaw, freeze again. However you're concerned, decide how many times you would want to freeze it. Next, you want to seal your flour in an airtight container. You can put it into a 5-gallon bucket, you can put it into an airtight canister, you can store it in a Mylar bag, you can use oxygen absorbers, you could even store it in canning jars and put the lid on it and seal it with your Food Saver vacuum. Store your food the best you can. The most important point is that you have some food on hand. Next, I like to keep a stack of yeast products. I have active yeast. I also like using the fast rising yeast. Sometimes you're in a hurry, or there are just certain things that you might want to bake that might turn out a little better with the fast rising yeast. So look over what kind of things you would want to make and decide how much yeast you would like to have on hand and what kind you have. And know that you can store it in the freezer, can help extend the life of your yeast. The next thing I like to find in my prepper pantry are milk products. Perhaps you want some cans of evaporated milk. Maybe you would like to have some powdered milk. My favorite is the Nido Fortificata, but it doesn't last as long as non-fat dry milk. You can also buy the shelf-stable milk. It's UHT, it comes in a carton, and it can last for a year just in your pantry. I like to store a few of those extras in my refrigerator, and I find that unopened they last much longer than the date on them, and they have never been a problem that I haven't had them last. So if you like to use milk, find a way that works for you. Next in my prepper pantry, I like to have a stockpile of canned meat. They come in so many varieties. You can choose ones that you enjoy eating. Do you like tuna, salmon, crab, sardines? You can find those in a can. How about chicken or turkey? What about roast beef? Sometimes you can find beef strips that are spicy with peppers. You can find pulled pork, and of course the old standbys, ham, spam, and sometimes they call it treat meat or luncheon meat, and there's all kinds of combinations in between. Figure out what your favorite meat is and then stockpile some of that in your prepper pantry. Meat has usually a long shelf life and it can last far longer than the date on the package, but you always want to store your food in a cool, dark, dry place. You want to rotate it. You want to be using it, rotating it to the front of the shelf and replacing it, and that is how you have a working pantry. Pasta is a wonderful food to include in your must-have prepper pantry list. You can get all kinds of shapes and sizes. Steer clear though of egg noodles because they have eggs in them. They're not going to last as long as other kinds of pastas. And then think about the space they take up. Look at this big old package of thin spaghetti, which is actually going to cook very quickly compared to the space required for something like a penne. So if space is a concern, get the long straight noodles. You can break them in half and store them in a canning jar. Recently, I even found a banker's box and I was able to load it up with pasta. They fit in there perfectly. I can still go back and vacuum seal those or put them in a Mylar bag, and the addition of the banker's box is going to help them last for a long, long time. I have never had pasta that wasn't edible in my house. I've stored it for decades and it has always been fine to eat. But once again, store it in a cool, dark, dry place. And if you live in a hot environment where pantry bugs can be a problem, you might stick these into your freezer for a few days, and then make sure you don't store them in just a cardboard box or a paper wrapper, because they will get into trouble with packaging, getting leaks in them, getting stale, things spilled on them, and little bugs get in there. So seal them well so that they'll last the longest. My next prepper pantry favorite is oatmeal. Oatmeal is very versatile. You can make oatmeal, of course, but you can make muffins. You can add it into meatloaf. You can do all kinds of things. You can even turn your oatmeal into oat flour. If you have gluten sensitivities or other dietary restrictions with gluten, perhaps you want to look into how you could make your own oat flour using your oatmeal that's cheap and easy to store. Oatmeal is one of those foods that will last nearly forever as long as you store it into an airtight container. I never leave it in this package. I pour it into something that's airtight and seal it well. Lots of people love peanut butter, and it's easy to store in your prepper pantry. And you can eat it right off of a spoon. You can spread it on bread or crackers, or you can even bake it into cookies. It has a lot of protein and nutrition, but if you have allergies to peanuts, make sure that you find some sort of a nut that can last in your prepper pantry. I have actually had these go rancid, so I try to rotate them within the date on the package, because nobody wants to go to their prepper pantry and find that their food is no longer safe or good to eat, and then you've wasted your resources by allowing your food to spoil. So any food that you're willing to store, you should be willing to eat, and then you need to be using it, rotating it, and replacing it. Stock up on canned tomatoes. They're extremely versatile. You can already buy them in so many kinds of varieties, from plain diced stewed tomatoes, fire roasted, some that are spiced up with basil and oregano. You can find chili ready tomatoes. You can even find things like rotel that have, I think it's jalapenos in them, that are extra spicy. So look for varieties, think about the recipes that you make and how they're going to be the most useful. It wouldn't be a prepper pantry without beans, so of course I have lots and lots of beans. Beans come in so many different varieties. Figure out the beans that you like to eat. Those are the ones that you should have on hand. You can buy them in 1-pound bags, you can buy them in giant bags, but store them in an airtight container. Things like split peas and lentils are also very good for the bean category. They're legumes. You would cook them the same way, but they don't take as long. They're loaded with protein, and they can be very delicious and a nice change of pace, even if you're just having beans. You can have a different bean every day for many days, and then your meals aren't all the same. I also stock up on canned beans, whether they're baked beans, chili, or they're just the individual type of bean, like a navy bean, kidney beans, garbanzo beans. You can open a can of those and add them into an easy recipe. And then you're halfway there if you buy some baked beans or chili that has beans in it. There are just so many ways, they're so versatile. When you're storing dried beans, know that 1 pound of dried beans is equal to about 3.5 cans of prepared beans. So that'll give you an idea of how versatile your dried beans can be and how far you can stretch them in your prepper pantry. Of course, there's rice. Most people say rice and beans at the beginning, but I decided to count down and do beans and rice last, because all of the other varieties of foods are very important to have on hand. Rice can be cooked in 20 minutes. If you think the power might go out, store some minute rice, because even if you can't cook it, you could pour water over it and soak it, and then you'll be able to eat it. And this kind of rice, you're not really going to be able to unless you can pour boiling water over it and have it do a little bit of cooking. There's so many ways that you can serve your rice. You can serve it with beans, of course, but you can also add some tomatoes and make a Spanish rice. You can add a can of meat. You can do all kinds of things with rice to make bigger, better, fuller meals. And rice is cheap, it's long-lasting, stored in an airtight container. Stored properly, rice can last for 30 years or even more. These are the 10 prepper pantry foods that I want to make sure I have in my pantry so that I can make everyday meals on a day-to-day basis, no matter what the future holds. We're seeing all kinds of crazy things on the news, so it's nice to have a fully stocked pantry with foods that can last a long time, are not expensive to buy, and they're very versatile. So leave a comment below and tell us what are your top 10 must-have prepper pantry foods. It can give us all ideas and help us learn from each other. We have a real community, and the more we help each other, the better off we'll be. If you enjoyed my video, please share it with someone else you think might like it. Please subscribe to the Alaska Granny channel.